My name is John Cook, and I'm the president of the College Democrats of Georgia and a fifth-year student at Georgia Tech. I'd like to thank you all for coming to our press conference. The idea of guns on campus for me was an abstract possibility until very recently. My story begins in December of last year when, spurred on by crime around campus, students at Georgia Tech began agitating for concealed carry. Even then, I ignored this issue as settled in 2010. However, it has continued to simmer and has prompted numerous articles and discussion all around campus. Around this time last month, House Bill 981 was proposed to the Georgia Assembly. I suddenly realized I was miles behind the curve on this issue and quickly created an online petition opposing HB 981 and the idea of guns on campus in general. I hope this petition would expose a large silent majority that supported our side and did not want guns in our schools. The allies came fast when the petition went live. Within a few weeks, diverse groups were coalescing around our effort. First came students and teachers, who breathed new life into our effort when it seemed to die in its early days. They have since been joined by legislators and police officers, by national organizations and everyday citizens. And each and every supporter has helped broaden our coalition and strengthen it and help make today possible. I'd like to personally thank and introduce a few key supporters without whom we would not be up here today. First, I'd like to thank my initial ally in this effort, Catherine Grant of Valdosta State University. Without her knowledge and contacts, this effort would have foundered in its earliest days. Next, I'd like to thank the Honorable Senator Vincent Fort, who is not quite here yet, Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, Representative Pat Gardner, Representative Kathy Ash, and our friends Colin Goddard from the Brady campaign and Andy Pelosi from the campaign to keep guns off campus. Their knowledge and support have been helpful at every turn in this effort. Finally, I'd like to thank everyday citizens like Panka Miller for connecting our efforts with teachers and religious leaders like Gavin Brady and the Reverend Wendell Phillips, all of whom are standing up here today. House Bill 981 died in committee this year, but the idea of guns on campus and its ideological cousins will be back. Having concealed carry on campus is a dangerous idea, and it will be made all the more dangerous should it be combined with a lowering of the concealed carry permit age to 18. One of the strongest arguments for HB 981 was that the only people on campus allowed to have weapons would be over 21 and they would most likely live off campus. But imagine university freshmen, emotionally unstable in the transition to college with easier access to weapons. Further, where would a responsible permit holder keep his weapon? Freshman dorms don't have gun safes. College buildings don't have places where you can safely keep your weapons. Freshmen aren't allowed to have cars on campus. The lack of safety measures all but guarantees accidents will happen. Today is the beginning of a renewed focus on positive solutions to the violent problems that plague our state and our nation.
I want to thank all the college students across Georgia, all 300,000 of them, for taking an interest in this bill. In my House District 83, I represent Emory University, which employs 14,000 people and about 12,000 students. If you expand the Emory campus to CDC and the Veterans Hospital, it's 30,000 employees and the largest employer of Georgia in DeKalb County. Emory University is private property. Its origins are in private institutions, private corporations like Coca-Cola. I'm here to respect the private property owner, Emory University, that chooses not to allow guns on its campus or on its dormitories. We in the Druid Hills neighborhood are respectful of the private property and leadership of Emory University, which is a huge economic contributor to our area. Emory University should make its own decisions about whether guns should be allowed in dormitories. When I was in the Senate not that long ago, we debated bills that were positive on gun safety. Should we have gun locks? Should we have gun safes? Should we allow more than one handgun to be purchased at a time? Should we require pawn shops to lock up guns? We had a pro-gun and an anti-gun debate. There was a healthy debate in almost all ways. Today, in this era, our gun policy debates are all about more guns for younger Georgia citizens in places where they're vulnerable, college dorms. I will oppose guns being in college dorms. I will stand up for my private property constituent, Emory University, that should be allowed to make its own decisions on gun safety for its students, for its employees, for its neighborhood. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of this debate and bringing some honesty and some moderate conversation to how many guns we actually need among our teenage population. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Colin Goddard. I work with the Brady Campaign to prevent gun violence in Washington, D.C., and I'd like to begin by saying it's great to be back in what I consider my home state. I was a graduate of Simpson Elementary School and Pinckneyville Middle School in Norcross, Georgia. Sorry, I'm a little too tall for your microphones. I was also a student with a first-hand account of what it's like when someone brings a gun onto campus. Almost 5 years ago, when I was in my French class at Virginia Tech, a student with a dangerous mental illness was able to walk into our building and fire hundreds of rounds. I didn't even really understand what was happening until I was shot the first time. And the chaos of that day was more intense than anything I had experienced in my life. To think that someone would know how they would react in a situation like that is absurd, in my opinion. The law enforcement officers that pulled me out of that room after I had been shot 4 times told me that the first person they would have seen with a gun, they would have taken out. And law enforcement needs to be able to do that. They don't need to be wasting their time trying to distinguish between a shooter and a well-intentioned individual. It makes their jobs much more difficult, and it puts the safety of students and faculty at greater risk. You know, I didn't even know guns on campus was an issue until I heard people say, well, the way you deal with Virginia Tech in the future is to allow students to bring their own guns to school. I mean, they talked about Virginia Tech without ever asking anyone who was there their opinion and their experience. I know all the family members who lost someone that day. I know all the survivors that day, and not a single person thinks this is how we need to be dealing with public safety, with our students or anywhere else. But allow me to offer an opinion from someone a little closer to home. Granted, it's a little dated. This is the decision from a Georgia Supreme Court justice in 1874. And he said, "To suppose that the framers of the Constitution ever dreamed that in their anxiety to secure to the state a well-regulated militia, they were sacrificing the dignity of their courts of justice, the sanctity of their houses of worship, and the peacefulness and good order of other necessary public assemblies is absurd. To do so is to assume that they took it for granted that their whole scheme of law and order and government and protection would be a failure, and that the people, instead of depending on the laws and the public authorities for protection, were each man to take care of himself and to always be ready to resist to the death then and there all opposers. We must not accept that the best way to protect our people is at the last possible second. We can and must do better than just giving guns to students and letting them shoot it out with each other. If the idea that more guns in more places of our society made us safer, then the United States of America, the country with 300 million guns already in existence, would already be the safest place in the world. And we are far from that. To all Georgia students, faculty, administrators, and parents, please let your voice be heard on this issue. Contact your representatives, because this bill is moving without your knowledge and under your nose, and your voice needs to be heard. Thank you.
My name is Wendell Phillips. I'm the public policy advocate for the Presbytery of Greater Atlanta, which is a governing body of the Presbyterian Church USA. Unfortunately, the news that we received just about a half an hour ago is all too commonplace. This morning in the state of Washington, while the family was stopped, filling their car with gas, The young 3-year-old boy reached into the glove compartment that was unlocked apparently, found the weapon, a gun, and was playing with it. And the rest, I'm sure you know, the tragedy that occurred at that point. The young boy died at the scene. These kinds of statistics, you can talk about them, you can share them, you can read about them. Sometimes the statistics are so graphic and so numerous that our eyes begin to glaze over. But the tragedy and the heartbreak of families that find their lives changed forever because of the proliferation of firearms in our country today is almost legion. And we can read stories about what happened in the state of Washington this morning almost every day, including right here in the state of Georgia and most assuredly here in the city of Atlanta and in our metro area. Of course, gun violence is not new. We all know that. It's been building for decades. And as a minister of the Presbyterian Church USA, I'm happy to say that our Presbyterian Church USA General Assembly has not been silent on the issue. In fact, through the actions of 8 Presbyterian Church USA General Assemblies over the past 3 decades, the issue of gun violence and proliferation of weapons has been addressed, with each policy statement reflecting a growing sense of the moral, ethical, theological outrage that is deserving of those issues. The most recent meeting of the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church USA, the 219th Assembly, the 220th Assembly will be meeting this summer, and they will also be addressing these issues. But let me close with just what our General Assembly has said in the past 2 years about gun violence, and it really mirrors what's happening here among us as we fight against bills such as House Bill 981 and the bill that is still alive in the legislature to permit people as young as 18 to be able to purchase and carry concealed weapons. Among the 16 points that the General Assembly made with regard to gun violence and proliferation, these 5 really stand out. They urge that the number of legal personal guns a person may acquire during a reasonable time period be limited. When Representative Oliver mentioned this a moment ago, it says, well, yes, we know that. We've done that before. We've seen bills like that, or opportunities to stop bills that would permit greater ability to gain guns. But this is something that we need to be reminded of. Secondly, that more stringent enforcement of licensing, registration, and waiting periods be followed in order to allow for comprehensive background checks and cooling off periods for all guns sold. There be no categories of omission. Third, that the gun show loophole that we are so familiar with here in the state of Georgia be closed by requiring background checks for all gun buyers as well as gun sellers. Have you heard of the Tiahrt Amendments? The Tiahrt Amendments, which are attached annually to federal spending bills and that impede local law enforcement agencies as well as the ATF in their use of such things as gun traces, and that require the Justice Department to destroy within 2 hours the record of a buyer whose National Instant Criminal Background Check has been approved, our General Assembly has urged that those Tiahrt Amendments be repealed. And finally, that the legal age to purchase and carry a firearm remain in all states at 21 and older. As Colin has mentioned a moment ago, if what the proponents of more proliferation of firearms, if they were correct, that they promote safety and make all of us feel safer, then indeed, as Colin said, we would be the safest nation in the world. But we can also count the cost of that. All you need to do is to go down to an emergency room, and it doesn't have to be on a weekend. It can be almost any day of the week, and you can see the cramped emergency rooms with people with gunshot wounds. You can go to our backlogged courtrooms and see how many cases are there, and you can go to our overcrowded prisons. And most sadly, and much too often, Like the word we got from Washington State just a little while ago, you can see it in the shattered lives of the most innocent and vulnerable in our communities. Let us all join together for the students in the state of Georgia, at Valdosta State, at Georgia Tech, at the University of Georgia, any of the other campuses where these programs are beginning to blossom. Please show them your support. We are certainly trying to show as much support as we can for them here at the state legislature. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry that I'm late to the party. I had a few votes to take upstairs. But I first of all want to say that I'm proud to stand with this group of folk, but I'm particularly proud to stand with the young people, the students, who have organized on their campuses and been resistant to the notion that they are made safer by allowing guns to pile on to a college campus. I am proud to say that I represent probably more colleges in my district than any other Senate district in the state. I have all of the schools in the Atlanta University Center. As a matter of fact, I've not only represent them, but at times over the last 20, 25 years, I've taught in a couple of those schools. So I've stepped into classrooms and had opportunities to talk to young people. And I am very concerned, and I also, by the way, have Georgia Tech in my district. I'm concerned that we are being told, we are telling students, that we're telling teachers, we're telling administrators, that if you want to be safe on your campus, you got to carry a gun. Student safety is a concern and ought to be a concern of all of us. But it is a concern that must be dealt with rationally and reasonably. Young people, students, teachers, faculty members, and administrators must work with their college police departments. They must work with their city police departments to make sure that campuses are safe. But we should resist, we should reject the notion that a college campus is made safer, that young people on those campuses are made safer by making sure that we have more guns in place. I submit to you that those college campuses are more dangerous, that those college campuses are less safe when we allow guns to be carried in classrooms, for guns to be carried on those campuses. So I'm glad to stand with these people here today to say to my colleagues in the General Assembly, both in the House and the Senate, that we should reject any amendment, any legislation, any effort to allow guns on college campuses. The Board of Regents ought to have the responsibility and the right to establish the basis upon which their campuses are made safe. It should not be the purview of the legislature. It should not be made the purview of radio talk show hosts. I understand that this subject was discussed by one radio talk show host in particular this morning. We're glad to engage in that debate at any time, at any place, anywhere, because this issue is just that important. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to go on back up to the floor of the Senate and vote on some bills, but I'm glad to be here with these people. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Alice Johnson. I'm the Director of Georgians for Gun Safety. I'd like to thank Senator Fort and the other House members who are here who have been champions around trying to bring sanity to the discussion of gun policy in the Georgia General Assembly for a very long time. We've been down here 22 years. I think we have a little bit of a perspective on how these issues come up and how they're constantly supported by, unfortunately, a majority of the members of the General Assembly. But I'd like to say, first of all, that gun violence is morally wrong. Every one of us standing here believes that. The members of the General Assembly believe that. The governor believes that. Gun violence is morally wrong. To kill people, to rob people, to steal their vehicles, to assault them with a firearm is morally wrong. Law enforcement and the criminal justice system must protect the community from those who would make those kinds of acts, those who would endanger others. Among the many things that must be done to address gun violence, we need to do youth prevention. We need to reform the courts. We need more resources for law enforcement, for police and sheriffs. We need improved opportunities for those in poverty. And we must control access to firearms. We must stop believing the crazy notion that more guns will reduce gun violence. And we must ask the question every time there is a violent act with a firearm, where did the gun come from? Where did the gun come from when the child brought the gun to school? Where did the gun come from when the 15-year-old shot and killed another 15-year-old last week? Where did the gun come from when the criminals rob people and shoot people and assault people? And we request the media to ask that question. Where did the gun come from? The answer is not rocket science. They get guns from burglaries and car break-ins. They get them from gun sales where there are no background checks conducted. They get them from straw purchasers whom they pay to go in and pass a background check for them so that they can get the guns. They get them from gun traffickers who are drug traffickers as well. We all know the law of unintended consequences. The Georgia General Assembly, unfortunately, the majority of them, not the folks who are here today, have victimized us all with the legislation they've passed that led to unintended consequences. 5 years ago, we told the Georgians for Gun Safety, told the General Assembly that if they changed the rules around carrying a firearm in a vehicle, there would be more guns stolen from vehicles. You can ask any law enforcement agency in the state whether that in fact is now the case. Criminals get guns because they break into vehicles and they steal them. We told them a long time ago that it was an unintended consequence to believe that you could expand the rights of gun owners and not endanger others around them. Those consequences play out every single day. This legislation allows 18 to 20-year-olds to carry guns in public places without anybody's knowledge. They can carry those guns in a holster under a jacket, in a purse, in a waistband, in a pocket. And the public around them has no idea that they're packing. Consider the consequences of that. For young people who go to malls, who go to football games, 18-year-olds are still in high school. They go to dances, they go to other athletic events, they go to all kinds of activities. They're going to be carrying firearms if this legislation were to pass. This is a demographic group who, by their very human development, can't make the kinds of judgments that are required to carry a gun in public. One last word about the gun lobby, and I'm going to step out from other folks because we've been doing this work so long. The firearms manufacturers only want to make money. The gun dealers who want to make money, the gun groups like the NRA, and others who want to increase their donations and their membership by frightening everybody else. Those are the folks who are intimidating our legislators into making some of these decisions. You know from the recent media accounts that legislators have been threatened by some of these groups. That's how policy around guns, unfortunately, is made too often in the Georgia General Assembly. Only we, the citizens of Georgia, the students and young people and adults and victims, can stop that.
Today I'm here in my capacity as a teacher and a coach and an administrator at Pace Academy here in Atlanta. I've been teaching since 1996, a variety of schools and colleges. It's beyond my comprehension that more guns would lead to less violence in schools. Echoing my comments of my person preceding me, these are people without the maturity and the judgment that are operating in stressful and emotional environments. They're not in a position to make decisions about using guns in their own defense or in defense of others. I wouldn't want to work in schools where students had more access to guns or more guns were present. I'm a former Marine who served in combat, and I'm not sure I would want to have a gun myself. To have to secure a gun in a school setting where children are there, and that responsibility would trouble me. And so for someone like me who'd been trained, spent 4 years in the military, who had learned the extensive rules of engagement in a combat setting, I can't imagine that, assuming that high school age children could make the type of judgments that are necessary to possess a gun in a setting like a school. So I urge the legislature, I urge my fellow teachers around the state to speak out against this bill. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Andy Pelosi. I'm the director of the Campaign to Keep Guns Off Campus. I'm happy to be here with all of these folks behind me. I just wanted to quickly say that the Campaign to Keep Guns Off Campus is a national project. Right now we have over 320 schools in 37 states that support this effort. Things in Georgia are not happening in a vacuum. Guns on campus bills are being introduced in a number of states around the country. We've been able, with allies in places like Texas, Louisiana, Arizona, Idaho, Florida, to defeat these types of bills. The vast majority of schools right now in this country either prohibit guns on campus by their own regulations or they're prohibited by statute. It's an anomaly. Law enforcement does not support guns on campus. You talk to campus law enforcement, they will tell you we do not support it. We think it's going to create more dangerous situations. School administrators are not going to legislators, even in Georgia, I'll dare say, and say, you know what? We can't control our school environment anymore. We need guns on campus. We need our faculty and our administration and our students to be packing because we can't control it. The fact is that's not happening. There is a push around this country to introduce bills in various states that would force loaded guns on campus. We're here to say that we're going to defeat this in every state, and we're going to defeat it also here in Georgia. And again, if you talk to law enforcement, which we've been doing, they don't want it. They don't see that it's necessary. So I say to you, people need to rise up. As Colin said, the folks in Georgia need to contact your legislators and say you do not want guns introduced, not only on college campuses, but also in elementary and secondary schools, because that's what the bill talks about. So again, thank you very much for coming today. We appreciate it, and we'll take any questions, I guess.